The universe, in its infinite wisdom and spectacular indifference, had developed a rather sophisticated classification system for planets. Not because anyone particularly cared about scientific accuracy, mind you, but because insurance companies across 17 galaxies absolutely refused to cover extraction teams without proper risk assessment. Class 1 worlds were basically oversized nurseries, where the most dangerous thing you might encounter was a particularly judgmental butterfly. Class 9 worlds, on the other hand, were places where evolution had apparently gotten drunk, forgotten all its notes on reasonable biological development, and decided to see what happened when everything tried to kill everything else with maximum efficiency and creativity. Earth was a Class 9 death world. Not Class 8, where things were merely horrifying. Not Class 7, where experienced teams could survive with proper equipment and minimal screaming. No, Earth had earned its Class 9 rating through sheer, stubborn commitment to producing organisms that viewed the concept of proportional threat response as a hilarious suggestion rather than a survival strategy. The planet had sharks that never stopped moving, spiders that could kill you by existing near you, weather patterns that could level cities for entertainment, and mammals that would fight you over territorial disputes despite having literally no natural weapons except audacity and poor decision-making skills. The evaluation committee had specifically noted in their report, and this was a direct quote, "Everything on this world is either poisonous, aggressive, or has somehow weaponized being adorable. The dominant species combines all three." The Velcor Syndicate, however, had never been particularly concerned with committee reports. The Syndicate operated the most profitable exotic specimen acquisition business in the known universe, which was a polite way of saying they kidnapped interesting creatures from dangerous worlds and sold them to collectors, research facilities, and occasionally very stupid private zoos. They had been in operation for 4 centuries, had never lost a client, and maintained a 93% crew survival rate, which was apparently considered excellent in an industry where eaten by your own merchandise was a legitimate insurance claim category. Their success came from 3 factors: cutting-edge containment technology, experienced extraction specialists, and an absolutely shameless willingness to ignore warning labels when profit margins looked promising. Earth had been on their radar for 60 years, ever since the planet had been properly cataloged. The humans were still pre-contact, bumbling around their single world with their adorable little satellites and their hilarious ideas about what constituted advanced technology. They hadn't even figured out faster-than-light travel yet. They were using chemical rockets. Chemical rockets. It was like watching someone try to cross an ocean in a bathtub while insisting they had a really good paddle. But they were valuable. Oh, were they valuable? See, Class 9 Deathworld species had certain characteristics that collectors would pay obscene amounts of currency to acquire. They were adaptable, resilient, and entertaining in a watch them solve problems in the most unnecessarily violent way possible kind of fashion. Humans specifically had become something of a legend in certain circles. The reports from long-range observation teams had described them as concerningly innovative, inappropriately aggressive, and possessing a truly unfortunate tendency to pack bond with literally anything, including their own predators. One observation report had noted that humans had domesticated wolves, which were already terrifying apex predators, and somehow convinced them to become friendly companion animals that would sleep in their homes and protect their offspring. Another report mentioned that humans engaged in recreational activities that included jumping out of aircraft for entertainment, sliding down mountains on wooden planks, and voluntarily entering metal boxes that moved at lethal speeds while arguing about optimal routes. The Syndicate had been conducting small-scale extractions for years, Singles, mostly. Individuals who wouldn't be missed, or whose disappearances could be explained away by the human's own statistical categories of missing persons. Travelers, drifters, people who existed in the margins of their society's documentation systems. The syndicate would acquire them, deliver them to collectors, collect their fees, and move on to the next job. It had always been routine. Captain Threvix of extraction vessel Silent Prophet had conducted 47 successful acquisitions in his career. 17 of those had been from Class 8 or Class 9 worlds. He'd captured a Korvax screamer beast which could shatter bone with its voice. He'd extracted a Telmorian swamp drinker which dissolved organic matter on contact. He'd once personally subdued a juvenile Ktharan warform, which was basically a biological tank with anger management issues. One human female, traveling alone through a rural region with minimal surveillance infrastructure, should have been the easiest job of his career. Should have been. The target had been selected 3 weeks prior. Female, early 20s by human reckoning, traveling alone through what the humans called backcountry in one of their northern continental regions. She was hiking, apparently, which was an activity humans engaged in where they walked long distances through wilderness, carrying supplies on their backs for absolutely no productive reason, except, "It's nice out here," and wanted to clear my head. Humans were bizarre. The extraction team consisted of Captain Threvix, a Korlaxian with 30 years of experience and cybernetic enhancements that made him faster and stronger than baseline biology would allow. Second in command was Zikthrax, a Veltari tracker whose species could detect thermal signatures through most forms of concealment, and who possessed reflexes that operated at roughly 3 times baseline humanoid speed. The technical specialist was Plenix, a 4-armed Gorvathi who could operate their stasis equipment, scanners, and weapons simultaneously while providing tactical analysis. The muscle was Krothar, a Drexian enforcer whose species was basically engineered for combat and who stood roughly 8 feet tall with bone plating that could deflect most small arms fire. 4 experienced professionals with military-grade equipment, advanced technology, and decades of collective experience, against 1 human female with a backpack and hiking boots. The odds, by any rational calculation, were not even remotely fair. They ambushed her at dusk, 3 days into her solo hiking expedition, in a canyon region miles from the nearest human settlement. The plan was textbook syndicate protocol. Establish perimeter, deploy sensor scramblers to interfere with any communication devices, use neural stunners to incapacitate the target, apply stasis field, load into extraction shuttle, and be off-world before anyone even realized she was missing. They had executed this exact sequence 47 times before. Zikthrax spotted her first, thermal signature clear against the cooling rocks as she made camp near a stream. She was setting up a tent, doing that thing humans did where they talk to themselves while working through tasks. Okay, tent goes here. Rocks for the fire ring, water needs filtering, dinner is freeze-dried something that claims to be stroganoff but is probably lying. The team moved into position with practiced efficiency. Threvix took point, Krothar flanked right, Plenix monitored from the ridge with equipment, and Zikthrax circled to cut off potential escape routes. Standard formation. They'd done this so many times they could execute it in their sleep. Threvix activated his communicator. All positions confirmed. Target is isolated. Proceeding on my mark. 3, 2. That's when Plenix disappeared. Not metaphorically. Not moved out of position, disappeared. Actually vanished from his perch on the ridge. One moment his life signs were clear on all their tactical displays, and the next moment there was nothing. No signal, no thermal reading, no communication response. Threvix froze. Plenix report. Plenix, confirm your status. Silence. Zigthrax, do you have eyes on Plenix's position? The tracker's voice came back confused. Negative, Captain. I'm showing no thermal signature at his last known location. Could be equipment malfunction. Check it out. Ktharan, hold position. Zigthrax moved swiftly up the ridge, his superior senses scanning for any trace of their missing team member. He reached the position where Plenix had been stationed approximately 30 seconds prior. The equipment was still there. The scanner, array, the stasis generator, the weapons, all of it, neatly placed on the rock outcropping. No Plenix. Captain, this is... His equipment is here, all of it. But there's no sign of... Zigthrax's communication cut off mid-sentence. Threvix felt the first cold finger of actual concern trace down his spine. In 30 years of extractions, team members didn't just vanish. Equipment didn't malfunction simultaneously. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Ktharan, converge on my position, now. The Drexian enforcer moved through the brush with surprising stealth for something his size, reaching Threvix's location within moments. They both had weapons drawn now, scanning the darkening canyon with every sensor their equipment possessed. What are we dealing with, Captain? Unknown. 2 team members are off comms. We need to... The rock that hit Ktharan came from above and behind, roughly the size of a human head, traveling at a velocity that suggested it had been thrown rather than dropped. It struck the Drexian directly on his shoulder joint, the one spot where his bone plating was thinnest to allow for arm mobility. The impact would have killed most species instantly. Ktharan merely staggered, roared, and spun to face his attacker. There was nothing there. Show yourself, Ktharan bellowed, which was adorable, really, as if anything that had just taken out 2 team members silently was going to politely reveal its position because he asked loudly. Another rock, smaller this time, struck him in the back of the knee. The joint buckled. As Ktharan went down, a length of what appeared to be cord, probably from her tent rigging, wrapped around his neck from behind. The human female, because of course it was the human female, had somehow gotten behind an 8-foot combat-specialized enforcer without being detected, and was now applying a chokehold while using her entire body weight as leverage. Ktharan thrashed, reaching back to grab her, but she'd positioned herself in his blind spot with the kind of precision that suggested she'd done this before. Or at least understood the basic principle that leverage beats strength when applied correctly. Threvix raised his neural stunner, trying to get a clear shot, but they were moving too fast, and he couldn't risk hitting Ktharan. Release him. We are authorized syndicate personnel conducting legal... She laughed. Actually laughed. While choking out a Drexian enforcer, she found something funny. Legal? Legal? You're trying to kidnap me, you absolute muppets. Ktharan's movements were slowing. The cord was doing its job. The human female adjusted her position, placed her foot against his back for additional leverage, and pulled. Something in Ktharan's neck made a sound that Threvix really wished he hadn't heard. The Drexian enforcer stopped moving. She released the cord, rolled away, and was back on her feet in one fluid motion. Threvix finally had a clear shot. He fired. She wasn't there anymore. The Garzel neural stunner pulse hit the rock where she'd been standing, leaving a scorch mark and absolutely nothing else. She'd moved, faster than his cybernetically enhanced reflexes could track, faster than should have been possible for baseline biology. Threvix adjusted his position, scanning with every sensor he had. Thermal imaging showed her heat signature, but it was moving. constantly moving, never staying in one position long enough for him to acquire a proper target lock. She was using the terrain, the rocks, the shadows, every available piece of cover, with practiced efficiency. His communicator crackled. Her voice. She'd taken one of his team members' comm units. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me exactly who you work for, why you're here, and how many other people you've done this to. And then, depending on how I feel about your answers, I'll decide whether you die quickly or slowly." Her tone was conversational. Pleasant, even. Like she was discussing dinner options rather than methodically dismantling his extraction team. Threvix had been in dangerous situations before. He'd faced down creatures specifically evolved to kill. But there was something uniquely terrifying about the human female's voice. It wasn't angry. It wasn't scared. It was focused. Clinical. The voice of someone working through a problem with full confidence in their ability to solve it. "You've made a mistake," Threvix said, trying to project authority he no longer felt. "We are Velkor's syndicate. We have resources, connections, legal protections across 17 systems. If you harm me, you'll have an entire organization dedicated to hunting you down." "Oh, sweetie," she replied, and the condescension in her voice was somehow worse than any threat could have been. "You came to my world. You tried to kidnap me. You've apparently been doing this to others. And you think I'm worried about your organization?" A sound behind him. Threvix spun, fired, hit nothing. "Here's what you don't understand about humans." Her voice continued from a different location. How was she moving so fast? "We're not just from a Class 9 Deathworld. We're from the Class 9 Deathworld. The one where evolution looked at every other planet's predators and said, 'Hold my beer.'" Another sound, another miss. She was toying with him now. "We're persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? It means we don't need to be faster than our prey. We just need to keep coming. Forever. Until you're exhausted. Until you make mistakes. Until you can't run anymore." Threvix was breathing hard now. His cybernetic enhancements were burning through energy reserves trying to track her. His targeting systems kept losing lock. She was everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "We're also tool users. Really, really good tool users. We can turn anything into a weapon. Rocks, sticks, cordage, the environment itself." Her voice was closer now. How was she so close? "And we're social hunters. We work together. We plan, we adapt, we learn." He spun again, nothing. "But you know what the really fun part is?" She was right behind him. "We hold grudges. We remember threats and we eliminate them." Threvix turned, bringing his weapon up, and actually saw her this time. Young human female, dark hair pulled back, wearing clothing designed for outdoor activity. Dirt on her face. No visible weapons, except what looked like a rock in one hand and a piece of metal tent stake in the other. She was smiling. The rock hit his weapon hand, breaking 3 fingers. The neural stunner clattered to the ground. The tent stake came in low and fast, finding the gap in his combat armor under his arm, puncturing something important. He gasped, stumbled back. She didn't pursue, just stood there, watching him with dark eyes that reflected the fading light like a predator's. "Your organization," she said calmly, "took someone from my hometown 3 years ago. Girl named Jennifer, 16 years old. Disappeared during a camping trip. They never found her." Threvix pressed his hand to the wound, feeling fluids he'd rather not think about leaking between his fingers. "I don't know that name." "No, you probably don't." Just another acquisition, right? Just another specimen for some collector's zoo. Just another human who didn't matter because we're pre-contact and nobody would care. She stepped closer. He tried to back away, but his legs weren't responding properly. But we do care. We care a lot. We're really quite protective of our own. It's one of those traits you'd have learned about if you'd actually read the full assessment reports instead of just the parts about profit margins. The canyon was getting darker, or maybe that was his vision failing. Hard to tell. I'm going to ask you again. How many humans has your organization taken? 40. 47, he gasped. 47 extractions, Earth targets. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had gone cold in a way that made the earlier pleasantness seem warm by comparison. 47 people, 47 lives, 47 families who never got answers. It's legal. Syndicate has rights. Your rights end at my atmosphere, she said. And you know what the beautiful thing is? Nobody knows you're here. Your ship has stealth systems. You picked me because I'm alone, isolated with no witnesses. You were planning to make this look like I just vanished into the wilderness. She crouched down to his eye level. So when you don't report back, when your ship doesn't return, when your syndicate sends people to investigate and finds absolutely nothing, they're just going to have to wonder what happened. No bodies, no evidence, no answers. Just 4 operatives who disappeared without a trace. You can't what? Dispose of 4 alien bodies in a canyon system that humans have been using to hide things for thousands of years. Can't cover my tracks. Can't make this look like nothing more than equipment failure or navigational error. She stood up, looking down at him with something that might have been pity, but probably wasn't. I'm a geology student. Do you know what that means? I study rocks, soil composition, mineral content. I know exactly which geological formations around here will dissolve organic matter with the right chemical treatment. I know where the underground streams flow. I know which caves have been unmapped for centuries. His vision was definitely fading now. The wound was worse than he'd thought. And I know how to make 4 people vanish so completely that not even your advanced technology will find a trace. The last thing Captain Threvik saw was the human female walking away, pulling out her communication device and speaking into it with perfect calm. Hey, Mom. Yeah, I'm fine. Signal's been spotty out here. Listen, I'm going to extend the trip a few more days. Found some really interesting mineral deposits I want to catalog. Love you too. Bye. Then darkness. The human female, whose name was irrelevant to this story because she never gave it and nobody survived to report it, spent the next 48 hours engaged in what could only be described as aggressively thorough cleanup. First, the bodies. She'd already identified a series of limestone caves 3 miles north that contained pools with unusual pH levels due to dissolved minerals. Limestone plus acidic water plus time equals excellent disposal method for organic material. The local cave systems were extensive, unmapped, and prone to flooding during storms. Very convenient. The equipment was trickier. Advanced alien technology couldn't just be buried or destroyed without potentially leaving traces. But it could be disassembled, separated, and distributed across a wide enough area to make recovery essentially impossible. A piece in a deep crevasse here, components in a fast-moving river there, circuitry scattered across miles of wilderness. Even if someone came looking, they'd need to know exactly where to look and have unlimited time and resources. She wasn't worried about time. The extraction shuttle was perhaps the most valuable piece, but also the most dangerous to leave intact. She couldn't fly it, couldn't move it far from where they'd landed it. But she could strip it for parts, remove anything that might emit a tracking signal, and ensure that if anyone did eventually find it, they'd find a shell that had been thoroughly cannibalized by someone who understood mechanical systems well enough to remove anything useful. By the time she was finished, there was no evidence that 4 alien operatives had ever set foot in this canyon. No bodies, no equipment, no trace of their presence except for some disturbed soil that the next rainstorm would erase. She packed up her camp, cleaned her equipment, and continued her hiking trip exactly as planned. Because stopping early would have been suspicious, would have created questions, and questions created trails that people could follow. Better to simply continue being a normal human doing normal human things in the wilderness. Just another geology student enjoying nature, and definitely not disposing of alien kidnappers with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd thought about this scenario before. 3 weeks later, Velcor Syndicate headquarters received a priority alert that extraction vessel Silent Prophet had failed to report in from Earth operation. Standard protocol was initiated. Investigation teams were dispatched. The last known coordinates were searched extensively. They found nothing. The investigation report, filed 6 months later after exhaustive searching, concluded that the vessel had likely experienced catastrophic systems failure during atmospheric approach and crashed in an unmapped wilderness region. The report noted that Earth's extensive volcanic and tectonic activity could have consumed the wreckage. Alternative theories included navigational error leading to ocean impact, or possible encounter with unknown hostile wildlife. The report made no mention of the human target. Why would it? She was just the acquisition objective. Just another pre-contact primitive who couldn't possibly have posed a threat to experienced Syndicate operatives with superior technology. The Syndicate's board of directors, reviewing the incident, made one significant policy change. Earth extraction operations were suspended pending further risk assessment. The profit margins, while attractive, didn't justify losing entire crews to unknown hazards. Earth's classification remained Class 9 Deathworld, but a notation was added to the file. A small note, easily overlooked, in the appendix of the evaluation report. It read, "Recommend elevated caution with human specimens. Species demonstrates unexpected capability for threat assessment and response. Individual humans, even when appearing vulnerable and isolated, should be considered potentially hostile until confirmed otherwise. Previous assumptions about technological advantage may be insufficient for safe extraction operations." The note was written in red. Nobody at the Syndicate particularly paid attention to it. Red notes were common on Class 9 worlds. Everything on Class 9 worlds was potentially hostile. That's what made them Class 9 worlds. Besides, 47 previous extractions had gone perfectly fine. This was obviously just an anomaly. Equipment failure, bad luck, statistical outlier. The Syndicate continued operations across the galaxy, acquiring specimens from hundreds of worlds, maintaining their 93% crew survival rate, and carefully, meticulously, avoiding Earth extraction missions. The human female finished her geology degree, wrote an excellent thesis on mineral composition in limestone cave systems, got a job with a planetary survey organization, and spent her career traveling to remote locations studying rocks. She never spoke about what happened in that canyon. Never filed a report. Never told anyone except possibly her mother. And if she did, her mother was exactly the kind of woman who would simply nod, say good, and never mention it again. Because that's the thing about humans from Class 9 Deathworlds. They don't advertise their capabilities. They don't announce their threat levels. They just go about their lives being normal and friendly and pleasant right up until something threatens them or their own. And then they remind the universe exactly why their planet earned its classification. The galaxy continued spinning. Civilizations rose and fell. The syndicate continued its profitable operations for another century before market forces and legal challenges finally shut them down. Earth eventually made formal contact with galactic civilization, and humans spread across the stars being their usual chaotic, friendly, pack-bonding, inappropriately aggressive selves. Nobody ever did find out what happened to extraction vessel Silent Prophet. Sometimes ships just vanish. Space is big. Accidents happen. Equipment fails. These things occur. And if certain canyon systems on Earth contain mineral deposits with unusually high calcium content and interesting pH levels, well, geology is complicated. Limestone formations are common. Nothing suspicious about that. Nothing suspicious at all. The universe, in its infinite wisdom and spectacular indifference, kept spinning. Class 9 Deathworlds continued producing improbable organisms with concerning capabilities. Insurance companies continued charging ridiculous premiums for operations on dangerous planets. And somewhere in the updated risk assessment files, Earth's rating included a small addendum that few people read and fewer people understood. Humans, it noted, are persistence predators with advanced tool use capabilities, complex social structures, and disproportionate threat response protocols. They are also remarkably efficient at making problems disappear without evidence. Recommend extreme caution. Better yet, recommend just leaving them alone. The notation remained in red. Some civilizations paid attention to it. Most didn't. Those that didn't occasionally lost extraction teams in mysterious circumstances. Ships would fail to report. Crews would vanish. Search efforts would find nothing. And Earth, spinning peacefully in its little corner of the galaxy, would continue producing geology students and hikers and travelers who just wanted to enjoy nature and definitely weren't disposing of alien kidnappers with the kind of terrifying competence that comes from being apex predators on a planet where everything is trying to kill you. Because that's the joke, really. The cosmic punchline that the universe seems to find endlessly amusing. Humans aren't scary because they're strong. Plenty of species are stronger. They aren't scary because they're smart. Plenty of species are smarter. They're scary because they're efficient, adaptable, and absolutely committed to protecting their own. They're scary because they can turn anything into a weapon, anywhere into a trap, and anyone who threatens them into a cautionary tale that nobody will ever hear because there won't be any evidence left to tell it. They're scary because they're from Earth, and Earth doesn't produce prey. It never has. The Syndicate's 47 successful Earth extractions became 46 after the accounting error was discovered. Then 45. Then 43. Funny how these things add up when you actually start investigating properly. Turned out a lot of those successful acquisitions had involved crew members who'd reported strange incidents, equipment failures, close calls, team members who'd barely made it back. Nobody had paid attention because the acquisitions were completed. The specimens were delivered. The profit was made. But looking back, with more careful analysis, there was a pattern. Earth extractions had a much higher crew casualty rate than other Class 9 worlds. They had a much higher equipment failure rate. And they had a concerning number of incidents where crew members reported that targets had fought back with unexpected capability. One final notation was added to Earth's file. This planet's dominant species has survived and thrived in an environment specifically designed to kill them for millions of years. They have domesticated their predators, weaponized their environment, and turned survival into an art form. They are clever, adaptable, and possess an apparently unlimited capacity for creative violence when threatened. Recommend avoiding contact entirely. The profit margins do not justify the risk. Some things should be left alone. The syndicate wisely, finally listened. Earth continued spinning, blissfully unaware that it had earned a reputation among certain circles as that planet where extraction teams go to disappear. And somewhere in a canyon system in the northern continental region, limestone continued doing what limestone does: dissolving, eroding, consuming, leaving no trace.